I'm Deirdre Bolton. We are continuing to follow breaking news. Two former top Trump White House lawyers expected to appear Friday before a federal grand jury investigating the events surrounding January 6th. This is according to sources familiar with the matter telling ABC News. Former White House counsel Pat Cipollone and former Deputy White House counsel Pat Philbin were subpoenaed by a federal grand jury investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol and efforts to overturn the 2020 election. ABC News reporting that last month. But joining us now with more on this very latest, ABC News investigative reporter Catherine Falder. So, Catherine, the move to subpoena these two men signaling an even more dramatic escalation in the Justice Department's investigation into the January 6th attack than previously known. Who else, just remind us, has appeared before a grand jury so far?
Yeah, look, so these two men are the most senior former Trump White House officials to be subpoenaed and to ultimately speak with the grand jury. We know that staffers to former Vice President Mike Pence, including his top lawyer in the White House, also spoke to a federal grand jury last month in July. We also know that his chief of staff was sitting with the grand jury as well. So definitely marks a dramatic escalation in the January 6th investigation. But again, tomorrow, seeing these two appear there in court will be significant.
Catherine, what are we expecting to hear from the former lawyers? What does the grand jury want to hear? What kind of information do they want from them?
Look, so of course none of this is going to be public because it's a grand jury. It will be behind closed doors. But look, we know that Pat Cipollone spoke to the January 6th committee. He revealed a lot about the deliberations that were going on in the White House, the outside lawyers who Trump was getting advice from in his efforts to pressure Mike Pence to overturn the election, to enlist these fake electors, if you will, in various different states. So we expect that he will discuss some of that. We know that the grand jury, that DOJ, has subpoenaed some of the similar records that the committee has requested from the National Archives, for example, so they have all that evidence as well. But look, these are two people who were there at the last days of the Trump White House. Cipollone was pressuring Trump against a lot of this advice and was telling him that he could face legal liability here if he were to go down this route of attempting to overturn the election.
Catherine, the top lawyer for the anti-government militia group, the Oath Keepers, has been charged in connection with the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol. This is according to a newly unsealed indictment. What more do you know?
Yeah, so she was seen in this infamous footage, this parking garage footage that investigators have shown between these two militia groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. She's facing one count of conspiracy along with two other felony charges and a misdemeanor charge. She was originally cooperating with the government here, but one of these members of the groups who has been charged with seditious conspiracy implicated her and turned over his text messages that show that she was telling members of this group, of the Proud Boys, to essentially delete their messages in the wake of January 6th. So she will make an initial appearance in Texas today.
Catherine, thank you so much, as always. Also today, the Department of Justice and former President Trump's attorneys facing off in court to debate whether or not a special master should be appointed to review the classified material taken during that FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. ABC News Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas is with us now from West Palm Beach.
DOJ expected to press its case that the special master is not needed and that President Trump and his team have not acted in good faith, suggesting that some of them might have even obstructed justice. This after Team Trump doubled down on calls for a special master in a new filing overnight, saying Trump can claim privilege over some of the documents. At the center of the case, 322 classified documents that were discovered at Mar-a-Lago. 184 were handed over to the National Archives in January. Then in June, Trump turned in another 38. At that time, in a sworn statement, his attorney insisted there were no more classified materials on site after a diligent search. Trump has repeatedly insisted he's cooperated fully. But the FBI claims it soon uncovered evidence from multiple sources indicating classified documents remained at the premises. What they found on August 8th, over 100 classified records, including information classified at the highest levels. DOJ even releasing this picture of some of them. As you can see, they're clearly marked secret, top secret, and SCI, sensitive compartmented information, only for the eyes of those with the highest security clearance. Despite Team Trump's insistence that all documents were stored in a storage room, 3 classified documents were found in desks of Trump's own office. These revelations, part of a blistering 36-page motion the Justice Department filed Tuesday, concluding efforts were likely taken to obstruct the government's investigation. When he ran against Hillary Clinton, Trump insisted he would handle the nation's secrets with the utmost care.
In my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law.
Now he faces the potential of criminal charges. Federal Judge Aileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, has signaled that she's inclined to grant his request for a special master. Today, we'll see if DOJ's aggressive pushback is persuasive. Deirdre?
Pierre Thomas, thank you as always. Joining us now to break it down further, ABC News chief investigative reporter Aaron Kotarski. Aaron, first things first, can we expect a ruling today from the judge?
We could. It's possible she could rule immediately after hearing oral arguments, which are going to begin a short time from now, Deirdre. It's also possible she takes those arguments under advisement and issues a written ruling at a later time. Former President Trump's lawyers are insistent that a special master is needed to review everything taken from Trump's Florida home, because otherwise his rights are going to be trampled. And Trump's lawyers portrayed the Justice Department as unchecked, willing to impugn and leak and selectively publicize pieces of their investigation, including that photograph that showed classified materials positioned on the floor. We know that that's how the FBI does these things, to make sure that all the records are properly photographed and collected. The Justice Department says, Deirdre, that this special master is not needed because it's beside the point. In the month or so since the search, the Justice Department has already gone through the records. They also say that Trump has no claim on oversight of these materials because they're not his.
Yeah, Aaron, somewhat funny comments from the Trump camp about seeing those documents on the floor, essentially making a mess. But I want to get back to my notes, at least here. The DOJ's filing directly contradicting the Trump legal team's account of an in-person visit to Mar-a-Lago. This was back in reference to what happened early June 3rd, by this group of FBI agents led by Jay Bratt, the chief of DOJ's counterintelligence export control section. What does the DOJ say about that visit?
Contrary to what former President Trump's team says about cooperation at every turn, the Justice Department says it was denied entry into certain parts of the former president's estate, was not allowed to look at certain documents or boxes. And it really shows that the Justice Department tried to take less invasive steps to recover the classified material before the rather dramatic and unprecedented search of the former president's estate. One more note about that photograph. Even as the Trump team says, Deirdre, that this is not how these documents were positioned, it effectively concedes that the classified material was there. Just because it's not how they laid it out, that'd be like a drug seizure. And when the police show us all the drugs that were seized from an apartment, no, that's not how they were laid out in that apartment, but that's how the FBI ended up collecting them. And the Justice Department says it was well within its rights.
Aaron, thank you for that final point. Aaron Kotarski live for us there from West Palm Beach. Philadelphia is known as the birthplace of American democracy, also the place where President Biden launched his 2020 presidential campaign. Well, the president has returned to Philly, set to deliver remarks outside the Independence National Historical Park tonight. ABC News' Jay O'Brien is there with more on what we can expect. Jay.
Yeah, the president's theme this evening, as the White House says, will be the battle for the soul of the nation. That is something you've heard the president repeat repeatedly. He started his campaign with that message. It was something he said repeatedly as candidate Biden. Now, how he frames the battle for the soul of the nation is an open question tonight. Is this a political address ahead of a crucial midterm elections? Does he draw contrast between Democrats and Republicans? Or is this a message of unity? Americans, by and large, are concerned about American democracy. According to a Quinnipiac poll, 67% of Americans of both parties are worried that American democracy is in collapse. And one of the things that we've heard from the White House over the course of this summer is that they're hoping, in terms of midterm messaging, to, again, draw contrast between Republicans and Democrats. The White House has said they want to highlight what they call the ultra MAGA part of the Republican Party and try to show that that part of the party is extreme and get votes in the midterms that way. So is that the message we've heard from the president, especially on the heels of what he said earlier last week about calling Republicans who support Trumpism semi-fascism? That is what we're watching out of the president tonight.
Yeah, very strong language, Jay, in Pennsylvania. We know a crucial state in any national contest, but as you just alluded to as well, midterm Senate battleground. So what do we hear from the president this evening?
Well, the open question is, what kind of message does he want to deliver? And what kind of President Biden steps before those cameras this evening? Is it the President Biden who got before cameras right after the inauguration to discuss messages of unity? Or is it the President Biden, as we've been saying, that we've been seeing in the last few days, that's gearing up for a crucial midterm election, saying yes or saying on Tuesday about Republicans who haven't condemned January 6th rioters? Which side are you on? Is that the kind of message we hear from the president tonight? And then going into tomorrow, how does the Republican Party react to that?
So speaking of the GOP, Jay, we know that essentially in response to that very strong language that the president has been using, Republicans are saying, you see, President Biden is failing, in fact, to bring everyone under the same tent and to be a kind of healing president as he promised. What is the tone on that?
Well, we're going to hear Republicans continue that messaging today. There are some counter-programming events. And then, curiously, there is a rally that former President Trump is holding in Pennsylvania, that same state, this weekend. It will be his first rally since the FBI searched Mar-a-Lago. And that is another key point going into tonight. Does President Biden make mention of that Mar-a-Lago search? And we know the White House and the president have long said that, A, the president had no advance notice of the search, and B, that the White House is not involved. They're keeping it at arm's length. But does the president mention the temperature in the country, the calls from some extremist groups about civil war or the threats against FBI agents? Does he talk about the American experience at this unique moment in history? We're waiting for that as well.
Jay, thanks as always. Jay O'Brien with us there. The FDA authorizing new COVID booster shots designed to target the most common variants. Unclear how effective they will be. Experts obviously hoping they will prevent a fall surge. ABC's Ariel Reshef has the latest.
Those boosters are specifically tailored to target the Omicron BA4 and BA5 subvariants, which now account for 99% of new cases in this country. So what's the timeline here? Well, the CDC advisory panel expected to meet today, then the CDC director likely to sign off shortly after that. So we could see those shots going into arms just after Labor Day. As for who will be eligible, well, if these shots are approved, they would be available to anyone over the age of 12 for Pfizer's shot and over the age of 18 for Moderna's, to be given at least 2 months after your last dose. And the FDA says it's still unclear exactly how effective these boosters may be. There's just simply not enough data yet. But like the original shot, it would take up to 2 weeks to build up to full protection. Deirdre?
Ariel, thank you very much. UN officials arriving at that massive nuclear plant caught in the crossfire between Ukrainian and Russian forces. The shelling has intensified around the plant, putting the inspection in jeopardy. The risk of a potential nuclear disaster does have them determined to complete their mission. Foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burridge with me now from Ukraine with the very latest. So, Tom, what are these UN officials looking for inside the nuclear plant?
Well, Deirdre, they're going to assess the damage at the plant. Remember, some buildings at the plant not far from the reactors have apparently been hit by shelling in recent days. They want to talk to the Ukrainian employees at the plant. We've spoken to some of them, and they've told us that they've been working effectively at gunpoint. But crucially, we're getting word within the last few minutes from the chief of that UN mission. It wasn't an easy journey for them. They made it in. There was a spark in the firing and shelling in that area. They had to go through checkpoints, cross from Ukrainian-controlled territory here in Zaporizhia, a short distance but a long drive into Russian-controlled territory and to the plant. But the chief of that mission now saying that they've already carried out some type of assessment at the plant. They've spoken to employees. His language is positive. He's sounding buoyant. And crucially, he's saying that the IAEA, this nuclear watchdog, are able to keep some kind of presence going forward at the nuclear power plant. We understand that some of the mission has left now and is returning, according to Russian state media, to come back here to Zaporizhia, but some of their officials staying in place, and that's reassuring. The idea of having an independent international experts in place at that plant, which, remember, is on the front line, is reassuring for everyone here in Ukraine and people around the world.
Yeah, reassuring indeed. And I can only imagine from some of the people you've been speaking with that Tom, literally, as you put it, working at gunpoint in a nuclear plant, that stress must be unbelievable. In the larger context, Ukrainian forces have basically had some success pushing back the Russian front lines near this key city that we've been focused on of Kherson in the south. What is the latest there?
Yeah, Deirdre, we're getting some information. It's limited because the Ukrainians have put out a bit of an information blackout while this offensive is in the early stages and in a crucial phase, it seems. It looks like the Ukrainians have taken some villages. British defense officials saying that they have managed to punch through the Russian lines in certain places. To what extent is not clear. The Ukrainians saying today that they have continued to hit Russian positions. There's a lot of evidence that the Ukrainians continue to use the US-supplied HIMARS rocket systems that can hit targets behind the Russian lines to really cut off the supply lines to the Russians. The main goal of the Ukrainians in that area, southwest of here, is the city of Kherson. It's divided by a river. They want to cut off the supply lines to the Russian troops on the westerly side of that region and then move through the Russian lines, they hope, to try and take more territory. But it's a risky game, and that's why we're not getting much information at the moment. And we will really have to wait potentially days, if not longer, to get a true assessment of how that offensive in the south for the Ukrainians is going.
Tom, thank you for your excellent reporting. Tom Sufi-Burridge joining us live there from Ukraine. Coming up, the Federal Trade Commission suing a mobile analytics company they say sells sensitive user data from millions of smartphones that could potentially be used to track individuals at places like abortion clinics, domestic violence shelters, or places of worship. We're going to break down the privacy concerns after this. The Federal Trade Commission is suing a mobile analytics company, accusing it of selling sensitive data that could be used to track people at places like reproductive health clinics, churches, mosques, synagogues, and even domestic violence shelters or offices that provide mental health counseling. The lawsuit claims the Idaho-based company called Kochava sells massive amounts of precise geolocation data collected from tens of millions of smartphones, and that users can purchase this data for up to $25,000 on open-sourced markets such as Amazon Web Services. For more on this, ABC News contributor, managing partner at the Cochrane firm, Shauna Lloyd, with me now. Shauna, thank you so much for joining us. Is it legal to sell personal data from cell phones like this?
Absolutely, Deidre. It's actually very legal. We have no overarching federal laws that stop or inhibit companies from selling this data. There are a handful of states that have specific laws, and we do have certain laws that cover certain things like health procedures, your credit report, but we do not have anything that stops this sort of selling of data.
So, Shauna, what is the legal protection? Is that, for example, if somebody takes my data as long as they scrub my name, is that what makes it acceptable?
Absolutely. As long as certain parts of it identifying data is taken out of it, it can be sold. But you can still identify where people are moving, where they go, what they're doing. You can still, all of that geo-tracking is very much legal to be sold. So companies buy it, it's supposed to be to market to you about places you've been, things that you've seen. But it can also be used for activities that are not so good.
The FTC making this argument that the data can be used, as you're rightly saying, to identify people, even if, for example, in my case, my name is not exactly connected, but particularly with recent developments through the Supreme Court, the worry for abortion or healthcare providers who are helping women. I mean, how significant is this during this particular time when we're looking at states that have passed laws banning abortions?
It's a very significant thing when we think about it, because if you can track someone down to where they've been, sites that they're looking at, and track that back to an address or an individual or a family, this has broader implications, because now they can use this information to enforce some of these laws. And the information right now is legally bought and sold to other entities.
So what can people do? I mean, is there a way to just turn off? I mean, sometimes you do get these permissions, sort of ask not to track or ask not to collect. You just go through and shut all of that off in your phone?
Realistically, these phones have so many ways in which they're tracking your data that it's not just a one-click button. Sure, you cannot have a specific app track something, but the phones themselves are tracking all of this location. This information is being tracked and sold whether or not you fully agree to all of it. It's up to these individual companies to govern and to write their own privacy policies. You know, until we have some sort of overarching law that governs what is considered private and how they can use it, this information is currently available to different entities.
So, Sean, I have to ask you this. The general manager of the Kucheva Collective says in a statement that it operates within compliance of all rules and laws, including those specific to privacy, and that the FTC fundamentally misunderstands its data marketplace, that it actually has a new capability to block geodata from sensitive locations. It is currently working on implementing it. So is that enough of a defense here, even if the company has no control over how its customers use the data? In other words, once it's sold, it's gone.
That's right. And I think that's the bigger part of what we're looking at and the broader implication. Once this information is sold, people can use it as they will. And I think that what we're seeing here is that we have to address what is private information. This is an entirely new area. You know, these data tracking devices, these cell phones, this is information that wasn't readily available, 10, 15 years ago. So what you're talking about is a new area that hasn't been regulated. There aren't laws specifically addressing what people can do with the information when they've bought it. And I think that what we're going to start to see is this broader conversation about privacy. What is considered sensitive data? How can these companies buy this information? What can they do with it? I think those are the things that you're going to start seeing addressed coming out of this particular case.
Shauna, thank you so much. Shauna Lloyd with us there. We will be right back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin has lost her latest bid for a political comeback. She was defeated by Democrat Mary Peltola in a special election for Alaska's only House seat. Peltola will become the first Native Alaskan woman to serve in Congress. She will serve until November, when Palin is expected to run again and hopes to win a full term. Reports of sexual assaults across the U.S. military jumping by 13% last year. That is according to the Associated Press. The significant rise follows 2 years of relatively small increases of 1% to 3%, which may have been partly due to COVID-19. A U.S. official says a new Pentagon report will show that close to 35,000 military service members reported a sexual assault in 2021, a significant increase over the close to 20,000 that reported them in 2018. I'm Deirdre Bolton. Stay with us at ABC News Live. We will continue the day with more news, context, and analysis.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.